I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to cover protests as part of a national media outlet and why it is so easy to sort of misunderstand what's going on. First, I want to show you the gear that we were assigned to bring, that I was assigned to bring. I still have some of it. It's a crazy thing. Like, you're taught to bring all kinds of stuff with you to stay safe when you're in this place. And if you saw like the footage of the Australian reporter being shot with a rubber bullet, you can sort of see why things are so dangerous. So I'm going to show you this stuff, and then I'll sort of talk a little bit about why we carry all this stuff and why it's so important. So first of all, the number one thing that I think is most important is this, and it's a Sharpie. The Sharpie is crucial because what you need to do is write on your forearm the number you want to be able to call if you get arrested. In my case, it was calling the news desk at NBC or the news desk at Al Jazeera, depending on who I was working for, because you're going to be so discombobulated, you're not going to be able to remember any numbers, and that's really who you're going to need to call, much more than a spouse or anybody else. You need the news desk, because they're the ones who are going to help you with legal representation, with making sure that you're not injured. Like, they're the ones that are going to take care of you. So that's a big part of it. The other part of it is bringing with you a true trauma kit. So I have a kit here with me for if you really get injured, and it includes all kinds of stuff. It's got a quick clot bandage. It's the kind that has the special chemicals in it that clot really quick. And then the other part is this crazy thing. This is a tourniquet. In case you really, really get injured, you're supposed to bring this with you and have it with you. And it's crazy. You're taught to, this sort of basically, like, if you have a big hole out of which your blood is leaking, you need to stop the plumbing, turn off the water, turn off the plumbing, right? And that's what a tourniquet does, is you are clamping off the blood vessels in that part of the body on a limb such that it can't escape any longer. Supposedly it's incredibly painful. I've played with it a little bit just to put it on for a second. Supposedly it hurts like hell. And then it starts to hurt more and more. Horrible. And on it, this is the crazy thing, there's a little thing here that says time. And the tourniquet kit comes with a pen, a permanent pen, or a pen that you can write the time, because a physician or an EMT looking at this tourniquet needs to know what time it went on to know whether you're going to save that limb or not. So that's one thing. Another thing you bring with you is a way of breathing when you get hit with tear gas. I had the bad fortune of going to a protest once without this, and suddenly flashbangs and tear gas get set off, and I got a face full of tear gas. It is a terrible thing. There's a reason they use it to disperse crowds, because it really turns you off. And so I have a full-on face mask, full-on gas mask. I had a colleague who was so brilliant. He sound engineer, who put a microphone against it, and then, or I think even inside it, such that I could talk without having to hold a mic, because you might have to run, you might have to be doing stuff with your hands. So yeah, gas mask, and then helmet. In this case, a climbing helmet, used in climbing to protect you from the rocks that fall off a cliff above you, but it's because people throw things at you when you're a journalist. And this brings me to the thing I want to talk about why it's sort of, not to make journalists and their travails sort of the main thing, but like, lots of journalists are getting hurt in these kinds of protests these days because they're a target. It used to be once upon a time that being a journalist meant you were the only way that the person you were interviewing was going to get their message to the world. Today, with our phones and social media, that's no longer true. So the media is no longer seen as, no longer has this special protection conferred upon them by being the gatekeepers of getting your message out. Now, whether they should be allowed to be the gatekeepers and so forth is all up for debate. But the fact is, it created an aura of protection around journalists when they go to a war zone or anywhere else, where it was much more advantageous for you to work with that journalist so you could get on their air than it was to hurt them. Today, that's not true anymore. If anything, hurting a journalist in some cases, this was ISIS's whole thing, was more advantageous than working with them, because you can film it yourself and use it for your own purposes. So scary stuff. And so in my experience, I've been out there in a protest where the producers were at the show that you're going to be going on, whatever the hour of television is that you're going to be going on, what they really want is for you to keep the lights on all the time and be ready to go live at a moment's notice. They want you to stay up, is what they say, for a full hour or whatever. But what you have to always say to them is, listen, we can't be up the whole time because we can't have lights on the whole time because it draws too much attention to us. Also, I'm 6'7", so I stand out from the crowd a little bit. And so you have to keep as low a profile as you can until it's time to go to air. That's a crazy part of it. Now, the optics of it all. I mean, so looking at this here, this is a live feed from the AP, Associated Press. And what's so important to recognize is that this is the vast majority of what's going on. People mingling about, wondering where the action is, and there being a kind of like, there's a guy in a bullhorn and the rest of it. There is a demonstration taking place. But the footage that you see, and this is the problem, right, with the optics, is that a photographer, a camera person, a writer, a producer, a correspondent are going to be attracted to the most crazy thing happening, the most dramatic events around, as opposed to the most representative thing around. So I have had times where I've been able to cover it and say, listen, there's kind of a hushed atmosphere right now. It's pretty church-like at the moment. And that did get on air, and I felt good about that. But for the most part, there's some pressure to come up with the best possible visuals you can, which I understand. But that unfortunately creates the impression for people who don't understand. I mean, this is the thing, right? Look at the look at the number of people. There's a small group of people here, and then a much bigger world that you're seeing here. Now, they're showing you, the rest of it. This is the aerial footage. There's just not that many people, right? There's police lined up, and there's people milling about, but it's not throngs of people setting stuff on fire. And so there's something, misleading, I think, if you don't know how this stuff works, where if you're an uninitiated person and you don't know LA, you don't know how big it is, you would think, man, the whole place is on fire. And that allows someone like President Trump to lie about what's happening and make it seem as if he's sending troops in to rescue a whole city, when in fact it's restricted to a few blocks, and it tends to be a handful of people. And so that's one thing. The other thing, however, is that there is a category of, I wouldn't even call it protester. For me, there's usually there's just the vast majority of people there are tons and tons and tons of good faith protesters who are, people who work in the neighborhood or people who are drawn to it because, for intellectual reasons, people who are, lawyers and students and whoever, teachers who come in truly to just be part of what they feel is an important thing to demonstrate. But then there's a category of person that does come in specifically to cause trouble. And I've seen this in all the protests that I've covered. There is a category of person who comes in who has this veneer of real experience and real, trying to set shit off. And that category of person is tough because it creates, so here's police sort of setting up to try and keep people from going, right? And we'll see what happens here. But generally speaking, people are very peaceful in their interactions with the police. But then there will just be a handful of people who come in who want to start something. And I don't know if they're just thrill seekers. I don't know if they're ideological. They're certainly not professional. I look at them and I'm like, you guys are these are people who are having trouble putting meals together a lot of the time. But there's a real interest on their part in creating trouble. And for me, that's the thing that gets misconstrued, is that that's sort of the norm, because it really isn't. And so I have to bring all of this stuff because it is a dangerous assignment. Journalists are often targeted. There's real anger toward journalists a lot of the time in these crowds, because from the same kinds of people that want to set stuff off with the police. But for the most part, these are peaceful demonstrations. And the vast majority of people there are just everyday normal people. And so I wish that there was a way to better construe that reality than what we tend to get, which is these very specific, very dramatic scenes, because those scenes create the most memorable kind of content. Content gets attention, attention gets clicks.